Okay, was there another question? I accidentally raised my own hand. Okay, I just didn't know that's how that worked. Okay. I don't know Google Meets.
Mr. English, did you have a question?
I sure did. I sure did. And great conversation tonight, sister. We love your insight. We love your information. We love your experience. And I just kind of have a little synopsis, and I want you to kind of let me know what you think about it. In regards to your year, 1970, that is a very particular year to be looked at. And the reason why I say that is because we all know what happened to Emmett Till in the 50s. And so the reason why we start to think about, for example, the civil rights movement and everything that it kind of entailed, remember the civil rights movement was in the 60s. So when we look at, for example, how Black people were looking for jobs in the 60s. They were looking to be unsegregated. We were looking to have an unsegregated society, and the perspective of that, and how Black people were coming from the plantation. Basically, Black people were sold into their freedom. And we look at 1970, for example, as like I would call the times after the civil rights movement. The reason why I'm saying all this is because when you look at lineage-based reparations and you look at the 50s and you kind of see how this country was moving forward with some of its immigration rights that we pioneered, that we helped make happen, and how you had people from the diaspora coming as students into our society, into Black society, to receive free education that Black people in America fought for. And you look at some of the benefits from that era when it comes down to that free education. And the question is, and it's not even a question, but I just want you to kind of think about and give me what you think of your thoughts on it. But instead of going back to 1970, why aren't we going back to 1950 when we all know basically we still have, for example, relatives that are alive today that were born in the 1950s, but we all know exactly, without having to basically go back too far with our paperwork, we know exactly where they were born. They were either born as freedmen or they were born on a plantation. So just from that perspective of it, we can really get a good view of, for example, whose families went through the atrocities. And the reason why I say that is because it is highly important that we understand that the level of what we consider white supremacy, because it's a planet thing, but the level of trauma and anguish and everything that we talk about has been different for U.S. Descendants of chattel slavery, foundational Black Americans. It's been different than those from the diaspora. Our stories are different, whether we're Black or not. Our stories are different. So I kind of want you to kind of elaborate on why it's important to go back to 1970 instead of 1950, when I think more of the lineage base would have no problem with being eligible there.
Thank you, Mr. English, for your question and for your analysis. And this is my response to that. The modern way of looking at reparations is not that it's limited to the enslavement era, but also to what we call the Jim Crow apartheid era as well. As you very correctly stated, folk from Africa and the Caribbean started coming over here, probably, I would say, like you said, in the 50s. And as such, they, like those of us who were know that we were born here and throughout our ancestry, were subjected to that Jim Crow apartheid as well. I'm not quite sure how old you are, or if you have any memory of names such as Amadou Diallo and Abner Louima, who were immigrants who were viciously, in separate instances, one was murdered by police and the other was severely tortured with a broomstick at a police station. No one stopped to ask them, well, when did you come here? Are you an immigrant? Your ancestry goes back to a plantation? No, they looked at the skin color. You were black. And you were so as part of the reparation remedy, when we talk about enslavement era and its living legacies, i.e. Jim Crow apartheid era and its living legacies, that last down through to today. In my analysis, where I came up with 1970, and I thought it was a very principled compromise that I came up with, because 1970, it was before the huge influx of immigrants started coming in. There was a huge influx after that, but it also is the first census after these so-called, I won't call them so-called, but since the civil rights legislation in the 60s, the Voting Rights Act, blah, 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 of which we're still trying to fight for. But that was the time when the United States was basically saying, was supposed to be saying, we're trying to make this a multiracial democracy. Well, we know that really wasn't the situation, but this was the first census after that. So that's why Nkechi Taifa, this was not in Cobra, NARC, this was not any collaboration with any other groups. I put it in the book so that we can have this conversation. So like I've said, I'm glad that you raised your particular view on it, but that's what I felt to be a principle compromise behind all y'all come and get it versus we're going to set a time frame if we're talking about specific cash payments and how cash is going to be divided up versus community or policies and procedures and things like that that benefit economic development, that benefit the Black community as a whole. So I appreciate your question, and that's my response. And it's grounds for conversation. That's why I put it here.
It definitely is, because, sister, at the end of the day, I just wanted to make this one rebuttal, just real quick. I know both of the brothers that you're talking about, and the reason why I said that, and the reason why I brought it there, is because when we look at reparations, and we look at foundational Black Americans, American descendants of chattel slavery, we talk about, for example, the people that built the country. So, for example, when I say 1950, the reason why I say that is because that lineage base goes back to those people that built the country. When you talk about people that were already here, when you talk about people, the 4 to maybe, I would give it maybe nicely 5% of African boats of the transatlantic slave trade that made it here, and then the people that already traveled here. Those are what you consider, for example, American descendants of chattel slavery, the people that are already here. So when you talk about, for example, 1970, brothers and sisters fought for those civil rights laws to allow the terms, minority, people of color, all of such to become inclusive. So we fought for those brothers and sisters, those immigrant brothers and sisters in the 60s and 70s. We didn't get ours. We still ain't got ours. And I think there's something to be said to the fact that the lineage base, the foundational Black people here still haven't got ours. You know what I mean? Whether we're native Black or another, whatever name you want to call us. But the bottom line is I think, and I'm gonna land right here. I think that there is a great conversation for example, the people that built this country being cash compensated. And I'll land right there.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment. And we have, is that Jarmel? And then we have, I think, Jane Prince and then Professor Johnson.
So you're calling on JM, right?
Yeah,
JM.
brother, that ain't me.
Okay.
Oh, take your hand up. Miss Prince? Okay, I think you left. Okay. If you come back in, or you could put it in the chat and I'll read your comment. But Professor Johnson.
Thank you, Trent. I'm not sure how to ask this question. I think the points have been made very good, very valid. I'm not sure what to do about the fact that coercive control of persons of African ancestry has morphed over time. It's not as if the idea of keeping a people entrapped or in place or repressed or taking away the value of their what they own, what they produce, and so on. That's all continued. It's just that it morphs, evolves into different forms over time. And a lot of these, I remember studying with Traherne about the St. Paul Recovery Act Commission. A lot of these things in terms of creating the racial wealth gap, they're still in place and still very much alive. And what I guess my question is, what do we do about processes of repression and so on that started in slavery, but which have never really gone away? They're just more subtle, if you can call it that, but they're still very pernicious. I don't know if I'm making much sense. It's hard for me to put the question together, because I could see making an argument of doing away with lineage as a basis, or modifying that some way and making it universal, because the processes of coercive control are still alive and well. I mean, lynching never really stopped.
When I just would add in, and I don't want to chime in too much, but just here, we know most Ethiopians or Somalians, which is the biggest populations of Africans in Minnesota, didn't get here till 1995, 96. Civil rights was already won. Immigration Act already won. Voting rights already won. Then we're using this term called BIPOC, which a lot of Black people find very offensive. And it's because you say Black, Indigenous, people of color. And I love my Asian American brothers and sisters. We love some of our African brothers, all of our African brothers and sisters. But some of, just like when we talk about Asia, Asia's not just one place. There's China, there's Japan, there's Indonesia, there's Vietnam, there's Thailand. So if we try to just say, hey, you guys are all Asian, they have different languages, they have different customs, they have different belief systems, they have different religions. So if I say we just put them all like, hey, you guys are all Asian, you're all impacted, but they have their own issues. So that's why we talk about, and even where Africa has over 50 countries, over 7,000 villages, different languages, different customs, beliefs, ethnicities, right? And they have differences, but they also have different incomes, different GDPs. And so, and they don't even call themselves Black. But when they come to America, they're like, okay, we're Black. So it's not, so those are just kind of some of the things. And then going back to the Immigration Act. But I think the way we are discussing it and the way it's been discussing it, and having somebody like Nkechi that creates room for us to have a intelligent conversation about the issue, because for a long time there wasn't an intelligent, in our community, I don't think there was an intelligent conversation about this happening. And I think we're getting to that point today. But as far as like so I would say, like, if somebody hasn't, like, if they didn't experience the harm that we experienced, then, like, I got hit by a bike. I got hit by a car on a bike, and then I got paid. And then they'll say, okay, well, maybe we'll put a stop sign there so nobody else gets hit, right? So those are kind of some of the things I was thinking about, but
Well, I see that, and I'm not trying to say that differences are not important, but I guess part of what I'm wrestling with is when you look at repair and things like that, as Nkechi said, they didn't stop and ask the one, and I forgot his name already, but who was brutally tortured in a police station. They didn't ask when he came or whatever. He was part of a repressed group, a group that receives coercive control. And there's always this idea of capture, of keeping a person in place. It's what I hear, overtly and very hostile, racist people saying. And so I'm just trying to wrestle with this. Is like, how do you create equity? And
well,
I just don't know.
my last one will say, here in St. Paul, so even saying the Asian, when we talked about addressing the wealth gap, the median income for the Asian family in St. Paul is $70,000. The median income for the white family in St. Paul is $65,000. Then blacks is $35,000. So if we're calling, saying BIPOC, and we're all saying, like, hey, we're all BIPOC, but then you make 70,000 because you're not dealing with the vestiges of slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and then, but then we're all getting the same equity, then that's not because we all didn't go through the same
That's
harm.
not
Even with, like, Nigerians, they're have a higher income than Black Americans have.
right.
And I'm done talking. I don't want to keep.
Okay, well, I'm not
but-
saying just throw it out to anyone who's not white. That's not my point. My point is that if you look at the diversity of peoples of African ancestry and so on, that there are still processes in place which maintain inequity and which produce a coercive control, which hold a people down, and how do we deal with that? And I guess I'm picking up as you're saying that's not part of the reparations process. That's part of the other process, most likely. But I don't know. For me, it's really compelling. I'll stop.
I had my hand up. I was wondering, can I?
Oh yeah, we couldn't. Go ahead. We couldn't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think you got two things open. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I think part of the problem I'm having with, like, the conversation is that if we're talking about generational harms, then I don't understand how we would just be going back to the 70s when we could, like, literally we have a country that had slavery, black code laws, convict leasing, redlining, racial covenants, exclusion from the Homestead Act, exclusion from the GI Bill, exclusion, from, all these government policy, generation after generation. And then we're saying, well, if you got here, 50 years ago, you're equivalent to the same, like, it's the same thing. Like, it just doesn't add up to me.
So let
And
me
I
just
know
say,
that,
okay.
well, I know that, it's difficult for people to see out of this paradigm of race, but I don't see why we want to keep enforcing it. Like, yeah, they did these harms to us based off of this warped idea of race, but now we're saying the only way we can move forward is by reinforcing that same idea versus like, let's look at the people who actually were directly harmed and repair them. And part of that repair to me is like, okay, I should know my family history. Like that is part of the harm, that we don't know our lineage. So it's weird to me that we're saying that now that doesn't matter. And I don't know.
Could
I
you
just
introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is John Mudd.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So
I
let me just jump in if I can, because I appreciate your what you're saying and your concern. I just want to make sure you're clear in with respect to what I'm saying. No one's talking about negating all of that. All of that is part and parcel. It's only when you have a commission or a task force which has to come up with specifics. And what we have identified, so the people on different thought portions of this scenario, we'll be dealing with the issue of proof. How do you prove? If you're going to, do you have to, are you going to require everyone to prove that they were a victim of redlining, or prove that they were a victim of sharecropper, proving that they were a victim of the GI? I'm going back further and further and all.
I mean, there's a very easy way to do this.
Or do you find a point in history? I mean, I'm just playing the devil's advocate. Do you find a point in history wherein you can presume that whoever falls within that rubric had ancestry that did all of that? And in the law, we also call it a rebuttable presumption. If you want to get that delineated, you're going to presume that class of people. And if somebody comes up with all this proof otherwise, that someone's committing a fraud or this and that, okay, then that's a rebuttable presumption. But I'm not even talking about that. But what I'm saying is you have to have some North Star, and what California said is their North Star is you got to prove it. You have to find evidence of one relative who that ABC 1, 2, 3 or whatever. That's what they decided on. St. Paul has to determine how they're going to do it. And that's what this discussion, and I presume discussions they will be having, is. And all I did was just offer another example. Again, an example that just came out of my head. It was not talked. We're in the process now of history in the making. We're in the process of determining, well, what do you want to go with the thing of actual proof? And then you have the person creative and unique, expensive, the sister there who said her records were burned, but just happened to find a record with the name of Brown that they were able to trace. But that's just a happenstance. Okay. So there are problems with both sets, is what I'm saying. There's no perfect answer to this scenario in 2003. So
I think there's a very easy solution to this.
Mr. Mudd, we got to go to the next.
Well, can I just say this last sentence and then I'll be done?
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, you don't necessarily need to prove the lineage of every Black American who descends from American chattel slavery. We already have the information based off who immigrated here. Do it the reverse. Base it off of whether or not you've immigrated here, and we can trace that paperwork based off of that. Then you're not eligible for reparations.
Well, see, it all depends on your definition of reparations. Like I said, the modern definition, which you have a right to disagree with, but that is not for the enslavement era alone, but for its lasting and living legacies. So I'm just saying, if you base it just on slavery reparations, then what you're saying is probably correct. But if you go with the modern definition, which you very well might not, St. Paul needs to determine how they want to define it. But if you go with the way in which modern in this country seems to be going, It's not just for the enslavement era, but for its lasting living legacies. So,
Creative and unique. I mean, Monica. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
I'm Monica James. I'm sorry. One of the things I want to say is I appreciate you, ma'am. I appreciate how you went about explaining why you chose the path that you chose for the 70 census. And I hope I can help someone else understand this a little better. I have a younger brother. He's a half brother. And his father is from the islands, but his mom is from slavery here in the United States. Yes, he came over. His parents came over, and yes, he was born here. I'm here to tell you that islanders and Africans and other nationalities do not see slavery and Jim Crow as big a deal as the people that were here suffering through it. They have said over and over, we should just get over it. But they ran from their country here to something we built, our ancestors built, and we suffered and died from here to escape what they were running from, and we had nowhere to run. They made sure that they kept us so poor that we had no money to even leave this country, the majority of us. I don't think our worries are as big as people think they are about other people because they don't agree with it, they don't believe in it. They believe in the supremacy here in this country and what is happening to blacks. So while so many people are fighting for it, believe me, there's just as many of them that's fighting against it. So I'm not too concerned that they're going to run up there and try to get that money. I'm not. That's my opinion. And I think by going to the 70s is a good place to start. It's just like she said, it's the first Census Bureau that was released. And there are people that cannot prove history because all my brother relatives and stuff that would help him prove history have died. The elders are gone. So how do he get his? I agree with you. Thank you. I just wanted to say that.
okay, let me just say one thing to that because I was just kind of laughing inside because this never was an issue before. I've been dealing with reparations ever since the 70s. This never ever was an issue. And it's not an issue that's come up with people from the islands or Africa. I don't even hear them talking about so I don't know why the controversy is such that it is in terms of being so vehement against other parts of the African family diaspora. Okay, they don't seem to even be asking for reparations over here. I'm just gonna leave it at that. So all of this controversy and vehemence is an issue that's in certain people's own minds and doesn't even really seem to be an issue out there. But be it as it may, St. Paul has a mission to do, and please don't just take what I said about the 1970s. Again, talk about it. I have, even since the book has been written, this is the first time someone's even mentioned what I had in here about that. So I appreciate you all reminding me what I even put it in here. But all of these things should be on the table for discussion and refinement or replacement, or whatever. And I do think California, unfortunately, when it was too fast. I think it needed more more considered time. But it is what it is. But now it's upon the jurisdictions that are coming after that to do that type of detailed analysis. I'm sure I don't hear you. Okay.
Speaking about California, I think you mentioned the Japanese American Redress Bill, or could you speak a little bit about that? And then I think and then Nancy has a question. If anybody else has a question too.
So yeah, this is an ancient history. That was really one of the spurs to HR 40 was the Japanese American Redress Bill, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. We're looking around and saying, okay, They could do that for the Japanese Americans, $20,000 for each Japanese American detention camp survivor, a trust fund to be used to educate Americans about the Japanese American suffering during World War II, a formal apology from the United States government, and a pardon for all those who resisted detention camp internment. If they could do that for the Japanese Americans, hello, what about for us? And so that's when we work closely with, when I say we, in COBA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, work closely with Congressman John Conyers in formulating what became known as HR 40, following the exact methodology that the Japanese Americans used, i.e., what was that? It was establishing first a commission just to study the issue. And then after that issue's been studied, proposals to come forth. Well, what I said to Ta-Nehisi Coates when he interviewed me in 2014 for his article, I said, what do you mean? It's only a study commission. It doesn't get one bit sent to anybody. All HR 40 was to study the issue. And despite that, for over 30 years, that bill still is not passed. So what did we do? We've studied it enough. Okay. We tried to go through the route where there was precedent through the Japanese American Redress Bill. It didn't happen. So now it is time we need to start developing those proposals. So the bill was modified to be known as the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. And that's the bill that's before us now. But it was the inspiration from the Japanese American Redress Bill. And I found out that their inspiration came from Black folk. Their inspiration came from the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement. And they looked around and saw all of the resistance and the mass protests and all like that. And that is what inspired them to organize and mobilize amongst themselves to, and it was members of the Black Caucus, such as Mervyn Donnelly from California at that time, that helped to bring their bill across the finish line. And they are very much our allies today. Many of the different Japanese American groups are working very, very closely with us to seek to get HR 40 passed either legislatively or via executive order.
One, I will go back to Nancy. You spoke about it a little earlier, but if you can explain to us what the AAHC is, or the African American, the 404-year African American Heritage Commission.
Oh, that's Nancy. Okay. You wanted her to say about it?
Oh no, I was asking you about it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. So there is a federally chartered commission called the 400 Years of African American History Commission. Again, a federal commission under the Department of the Interior Parks Service that was established to commemorate issues dealing with African Americans, to bring attention to issues and the like. They do those. That's what they do, and I don't know what else to say other than the fact that they wanted to call together persons who were part of government forces, state or local, city, municipalities, working on or looking to work on reparation proposals. And they brought as many as we could. I was their consultant for that endeavor to Virginia as part of the, I forgot what, anniversary of the 1619 our first arrival. And we had a number of great sessions, and we also participated in commemorative activities as well. So they do a lot of different things, but this was the first time that they wanted to highlight the issue of reparations. So I say it really, outside of what's going on in Congress, the first federal acknowledgement that things are happening on this issue around the country and seeking to bring them together.
we'll go to Nancy, and then we'll go to Jeremy. We got about 13 minutes left.
I just because I'm the one who started the conversation about the 1970 date. I just wanted to make a point to any of you who haven't read the book that you should read the book, because this was just a few paragraphs in the book. And actually, before you mentioned that 1970 census, you said, I now suggest the following criteria for consideration and discussion. So you were just like presenting an idea that could lead to actually what we've done tonight. But this book has so many wonderful ideas. So I guess I'm giving a plug for please read the whole book, because there's so much in there than just that point. And you weren't saying this is the way it should be. In fact, a lot of your book, you're getting at the point that there are many differing ideas. Many African Americans have very different ideas. It's not like all of this is smooth sailing and everyone agrees. There's lots of different ideas. But do we have personal vendettas against each other, or do we really have deep conversation to come to this wisdom together? So some people have already left the call. I feel a little bad that I maybe set a tone to the meeting that meant that was it. That was the main thing. So thank you. That was all I wanted to say.
So Nancy, I really appreciate that. And yes, it's the book provides discussion, food for thought. I always say that reparations, the quest for reparations is equal parts. It's edgy, it's exciting, it's transformational, it's confrontational, it's messy, it's confusing. But what my book, Reparations on Fire, proves is that we are beyond rhetoric, and we're well into action mode. We are, again, history in the making. And I know in the announcement of this event, my TED Talk, I hope everyone just clicks on there. If you don't want to read the book, you can just listen to the TED Talk. It's about 15 minutes later. This is what is this? This is just a transcript of the TED Talk, because even the TED folk were saying, okay, what's your sources? So I have sources in here for everything that I have in there, because some of this folk just don't believe history because it's not in the history book. So I have sources all in there. So Sharon, I don't know if you have a copy of this, but I might need to send. Oh no, I have it on my web, somewhere on my website. I can just send you the link. But this is the transcript to my TED talk. And again, it's okay. That's right. It was in the packet. Yes. What was I saying? Yeah. I always use my personal story or stories from my own personal as I talk about the more general. So this is issue about the general information about reparations, but from my personal perspective, beginning as a young teenager being involved in this movement to now I'm almost 70 years old, elder.
Thank you. And remember, pick that book up. You can buy it on Amazon, and I think they might have it at the bookstore downtown now too. Mr. English.
I think this has been an excellent conversation tonight. I appreciate that. I appreciate you, Nancy, for energizing the group. I think in some sort of way we really needed that because like the great sister was saying, and she was very eloquent in the way she was speaking tonight. Yes, there is many multitudes when it comes down to the conversation of reparations on how to get it done. But I think that I really think that when it comes down to the ancestors from the people that built this country, we do have what we consider a experienced, knowledgeable understanding of what racism and what reparations looks like. Racism, discrimination, and prejudice, they're different than what reparations is. And I kind of think that, as a group here, this conversation has been great. And again, when you look at prejudice, discrimination, and racism, yes, they are in the boat of reparations. They're in there for a certain perspective. And I think that as an ancestor of the people that built this country. I can feel people's emotion when it comes down to this conversation because I know where it comes from. And I think that there is more conversation to be had about this. But everybody here, I can't tell you how much I appreciate everybody listening, because this is a great learning experience on why it's important for Black people to receive reparations. So, and me, of course, you know, the way I look at it from the points perspective. I look at it from a compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and a guarantee of non-repetition. I look at that as a base of our agenda. And just looking at those points, we can always touch back on the lineage base, because I love lineage-based reparations. I love it. I can't tell you how much I love it. And I love these conversations. Sister, I appreciate you coming on and discussing it with us. And let's move forward, St. Paul.
Thank
I like
you.
that. Move forward, St. Paul. Can I just say one thing in closing? In that I called the book Reparations on Fire because fire illuminates, fire purifies, fire brings warmth, but it can also cause pain, damage, and destruction. It can symbolize the eternal flame of hope, or it can signify ruin or demise. The spirit of reparations is sweeping the country like fire. Whether it heals or consumes depends on how America responds to its long overdue debt, and possibly portends the future of democracy, both domestic and global. So that's why I call it Reparations on Fire. And my hope is that it heals as opposed to destroys.
Thank you. And we have Jane Prince, Councilmember Jane Prince is gonna add on or close us out. And
You are muted, Jane, you're muted.
We can't hear you.
I think she's trying to dial in since her computer isn't working.
while she's doing that, I want to really thank Nkechi, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, for joining us tonight, and not just for tonight, but for all the work you're doing around reparations. She held a great meeting last week that had Dr. Cheryl Grills. That was an excellent meeting, and you can find that on Nkechi's YouTube page. I suggest everybody go check it out. Jane, was you able to get it?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to say on this subject is that one of the things that, and I really appreciate where Jeremy's coming from on the lineage based, and I try to understand this, but as a white person, one of the things that I think we need to make white people understand that slavery was part of this continuum of, it started with slavery, it went to Jim Crow, it went to terrible discrimination, lynching, and so on and so on. And it continued up through our current white people's lifetime. I was in a meeting today with some of my constituents who said, "Why are you working on this reparations thing? I just don't get it." And one thing I was able to say was, my dad saw terrible combat in the Pacific in World War II. He had gone to college before the war, but when he came home, The GI Bill allowed him to buy a modest house for our family, and he was able to send 3 kids to college on the equity on that house. And that led to my being able to buy a house and send my son to college on the equity on my house. And I think what you need to understand is white people need to realize that all of the discrimination and complete degradation of African Americans continued through for 100 more years until the Civil Rights Act. And even then, we're now, the Voting Rights Act is again meaningless because the Supreme Court is dealing with it. So I think one value for white people is to Nkechi's point of setting a date of the 70s is that it helps white people to realize what happened in their own lifetimes that was so fundamentally unfair and discriminatory to African American people. Another one is growing up when AFDC, Aid for Dependent Families, was this thing that was criticized throughout the 60s and 70s. Like, why are we giving all this welfare to predominantly Black families? Well, guess what? We didn't provide any welfare assistance to households where a man was present. If there was a man in the household, they didn't get any aid that a white person would have qualified for. Meanwhile, the discrimination against those men trying to find jobs to support their families was something that we all know about. So I think that the value of bringing this forward and not making it necessarily 150-year-old history is that the systemic racism in our government and that we have benefited from kept African American people from ever being able to be successful and to raise their families and yada, yada, yada. So I do think that pulling it forward out of the historic incident of slavery is really important for white people to realize how much they've benefited from the system that we kind of never had to pay attention to. So that's my thought for where we're at in terms of setting a date like 1970.
Thank you. And this has been we're going to end on time, like Nkechi ends on time. I want to thank you again for coming out. We want to do it again, have a bigger audience for you, and just keep connecting and soaking up all that wisdom that you've been giving out to us. And in closing, I would just like to say we did have the honor. I thought she was on the meeting earlier to work with Lori from the Holocaust Claims Conference, and she was saying you don't want to make it super hard on the victim, but also there's something called the World Jewish Congress, and the World Jewish Congress, it fought for the people to get reparations in Israel who went through the Holocaust. Those were the Jews who received, I wish Tova was still on the call, but they received reparations for what happened to them. But the Jews in Mexico didn't receive reparations for what happened in Germany. But the World Jewish Congress fights for, if anti-defamation is happening in Mexico, the World Jewish Congress is on it. If it's happening in Alaska, if it's happening in America, they fight for all their people worldwide, but then they do specific instances of discrimination or anti-Semitism that happens against Jews. So I would just encourage all of us to look up the World Jewish Congress and just the history of reparations with Israel, and then other like we were talking about the Japanese, the Native Americans, and other people who have received reparations and looked at what their processes and procedures were. And we can add on or take away. So thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. We'll be sending out an invite. We did get this recorded. And again, you can buy this book. It's on Amazon. Do you have a website, Nkechi?
Yeah, my website is www.reparationeducationproject.org. That's reparation without the S, reparationeducationproject.org. And there's also a place where you can buy from Black Bookstore as well. So this AALBC, that's a Black Bookstore, or from Amazon. It's all on my website. Reparationeducationproject.org. That's reparation without the S.
Great.
It's been an honor to have
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, it's been so great. And come see Trey get his award on Thursday night. I put a link in the chat.
Okay, where is the chat? Can Trayvon, can you send it to me? Because I don't know Google, whatever this is, and I don't even see the chat.
Okay, it's right here on the side.
Yeah, you have to click on the little box with that looks like a.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Eventbrite. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a blessed
Thanks,
week.
everyone. Great meeting.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hey, call me.
I don't know how to leave the meeting.
And Keisha, you were so great.
When I'm in the Eventbrite and now I can't get back to the Zoom.
Well, don't worry. You can just it'll go away. I think Trey will.
My daughter just showed me how to find. Oh, okay, and everybody's gone. Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
You're a huge inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.